Okay, ready to trade in the everyday for the Alps. We're heading to Bavaria. And I know what you're thinking.
Beer halls, Lederhosen.
Maybe a little Sound of Music in the background.
Not bad for a Tuesday, right?
But you wouldn't be here if you weren't looking for something more.
Hmm.
You want the real Bavaria. The stories beneath the surface.
The layers of history, the hidden quirks.
The unexpected connections. That's what we're after.
Exact.
And luckily, we've got the perfect guide. Olivia White's article from JSIP.com, 10 must-see places in Bavaria.
This isn't just a list of tourist traps.
This is our roadmap to a deeper dive into what makes this region so captivating.
Think of it like peeling back layers of a fairy tale. We'll start with the iconic images, but then we'll uncover the history, the personalities, even the geology that tell a much richer story.
Love that. So first up, the ultimate fairy tale image. Neuschwanstein Castle. Olivia calls it a fairy tale dream, which, let's be honest, is putting it mildly. This castle is practically a Disney celebrity. It even inspired Sleeping Beauty's castle.
And yet, the real story's even more fascinating. You see, Neuschwanstein wasn't just about pretty towers and mountain vistas. It was the passion project of King Ludwig II, a man obsessed with myth, fantasy, and the operas of Richard Wagner.
Okay, so instead of building a man cave, Ludwig built a castle. What was it about this specific location that called to him?
Imagine this. A refuge perched high above the world, a place to escape the pressures of being king and immerse himself in a world of his own creation. That was Neuschwanstein for Ludwig. And it gets even more interesting. He even had a grotto built in another one of his castles.
Hold on, a what?
A grotto, a completely artificial cave inspired by a scene from Wagner's opera, Tannhäuser.
A man-made cave. Now that's commitment to a theme. You're telling me this guy was basically building sets from his favorite operas. See, this is why I love a good deep dive. You start with a pretty castle, and suddenly you're neck-deep in Wagnerian opera, which, by the way, I'm now realizing I need to learn more about. But for now, let's move on to our next stop. Rothenburg ob der Tauber, a town Olivia describes as a living museum, which honestly sounds both incredible and a little spooky.
It does, doesn't it? Because when we imagine a medieval town perfectly preserved, it begs the question, how did it survive untouched by time? Was Rothenburg miraculously spared from fires, wars, the usual wear and tear of centuries?
Right.
Or is there a more deliberate story here, a town consciously clinging to its past, carefully restoring and maintaining the illusion of a bygone era?
Ooh, okay, so it's either a historical miracle or a very convincing facade. I'm starting to see what you mean about layers. I'm already feeling more like a detective than a tourist.
That's the beauty of it. And speaking of breathtaking views, our next stop takes us to dizzying heights, literally, with Zugspitze, Germany's highest peak.
Okay, but before we break out the climbing gear, Olivia really emphasizes the experience of being on top of Zugspitze, the panoramic views, the crisp air, that feeling of being on top of the world.
Yeah.
But how do the Alps, geographically speaking, compare to other mountain ranges? What makes them so unique?
Well, while the Alps might not be as towering as the Himalayas or the Andes, they have a certain dramatic flair. You see, the Alps were formed by the collision of tectonic plates, giant pieces of the Earth's crust, pushing against each other, forcing the land upwards over millions of years. This created these jagged peaks, deep valleys, and those iconic alpine lakes.
So it's not just about how high they are, it's how they got there. Knowing that geological backstory makes the view from Zugspitze that much more impressive.
Precisely. And speaking of impressive, our next stop is Bamberg, a UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Olivia raves about its charm, cobblestone streets, those half-timbered houses you see on postcards, and of course the Rausch beer, which I'm told is a must-try for beer enthusiasts. But what makes Bamberg worthy of UNESCO status? What makes it so special?
That's a key question because UNESCO designation isn't just handed out for looking pretty. It's about preserving places that represent a significant part of human history and culture. Bamberg, with its thousand-year-old history, is like a perfectly preserved time capsule of medieval architecture and urban planning.
Okay, so when I'm strolling through those charming, narrow streets, what am I actually seeing?
You're seeing a city designed for practicality, a dense layout, maximizing space within its protective walls. Every crooked alleyway, every hidden courtyard has a story to tell about life in medieval times. It's a living, breathing testament to a bygone era.
From the heart of a medieval city to the shores of a pristine alpine lake, our next stop promises a change of pace. Get ready to relax, everyone, because we're heading to Lake Königssee. Olivia describes it as nature serenity, and honestly, after that whirlwind tour of Bamberg, I think we could all use a little serenity right now.
I agree, though it's important to remember that even in the face of such tranquility, there are always deeper stories to uncover. You're right, those serene alpine lakes aren't just pretty pictures, they're fragile ecosystems. And Lake Königsee's popularity presents a challenge. How do you protect such beauty while still allowing people to experience it?
That's a tough one. It's easy to forget about the impact of our presence when you're surrounded by such stunning scenery. Olivia mentions it's still remarkably pristine, so clearly they're doing something right.
Absolutely. Königssee benefits from strict environmental regulations, limits on boat traffic, even the types of motors allowed. It's a reminder that preserving these natural wonders takes a conscious effort, a commitment to sustainable tourism so that future generations can experience the same awe we feel today.
That's a good point. Sometimes the best way to appreciate a place is to tread lightly. Speaking of treasures, our next stop is overflowing with them, the Würzburg residence. Olivia pulls out all the stops here. Opulent halls, stunning frescoes, manicured gardens. This place is basically screaming, "Look at how fancy I am."
And that's precisely the point. The Würzburg residence is a prime example of Baroque architecture. Think of it as the architectural equivalent of a dramatic drum roll. Everything about it, from the sweeping staircases to the elaborate ornamentation, was designed to project power and grandeur.
So it's not just a building, it's a statement. Who knew architecture could be so passive-aggressive? But seriously, knowing this was built during the Baroque period gives it a whole new level of meaning. What were they trying to prove by building on such a grand scale?
Imagine yourself as a ruler in the 17th century. How do you show the world you're a big deal? You build a palace that literally takes their breath away. The Würzburg residence was a way for the prince-bishops of Würzburg to display their wealth, their influence, their refined taste. It was a symbol of power in a world obsessed with status and prestige.
Wow, talk about a power move. Okay, after all that opulence, I'm ready for some fresh air. Let's trade in those gilded halls for some natural wonders, specifically the Partnesh Gorge, which Olivia describes as nature's sculpture, which sounds pretty darn impressive.
And it is. You see, gorges like Partnach are formed over millennia by the relentless force of water. Picture this. A river, slowly but steadily carving its path through solid rock. Over thousands, even millions of years, the water erodes the stone, creating those dramatic cliffs and narrow passages.
That's incredible. It's like a giant slow-motion water sculpture. Are there other places in the world where you see this kind of formation?
Absolutely. The Grand Canyon in the United States is a prime example, though, on a much grander scale, but the principle is the same. Water, given enough time, can carve through mountains. When you stand at the edge of Partnach Gorge, you're not just seeing a pretty view, you're witnessing the awesome power of nature slowly but surely shaping the world around us.
It's a good reminder that even rocks aren't as permanent as they seem. Okay, ready for another palace. This time, it's Herrenchiemsee Palace, and get this, it was King Ludwig II's attempt to recreate Versailles. Now, that's ambitious, even for a king who builds grottos in his spare time. What was it about Versailles that captivated him so much?
Remember our earlier conversation about Ludwig's fascination with fantasy and escapism? For him, Versailles represented the pinnacle of royal splendor, a world of absolute power and grandeur. By building his own version, he wasn't just copying a style, he was trying to capture that essence, that ideal.
So it's like a greatest hits album of royal architecture. But instead of songs, it's palaces. It's interesting how each of Ludwig's creations reveals a different aspect of his personality.
Precisely. If Neuschwanstein was his fairy tale escape, Herrenchiemsee was his grand stage, a place to embody the kind of ruler he envisioned himself to be.
I love how even his architectural choices tell a story. Okay, let's shift gears again. This time we're heading to Regensburg, a city Olivia calls where history comes alive. She also mentions the Danube River, which makes sense given its historical significance. But what is it about the Danube that makes it so special? It's just a river, right?
But what a river. The Danube is like a liquid thread running through the heart of Europe. For centuries, it's been a vital waterway, connecting different cultures, empires, and ways of life.
So more like a historical highway than just a river.
Exactly. Think of all the stories those waters have witnessed. Roman legions, medieval traders, powerful empires rising and falling, and Regensburg, situated right on the banks of the Danube, has borne witness to it all.
So when Olivia says history comes alive in Regensburg, She's not kidding.
Not at all. In Regensburg, you can wander through Roman ruins, marvel at Gothic cathedrals, and enjoy a modern-day beer garden, all within a few blocks. It's a city where layers upon layers of history are visible everywhere you look.
Okay, Regensburg is officially on my must-visit list. All right, we've reached our final destination, Linderhof Palace. Olivia describes it as a hidden gem, which instantly piqued my interest. She mentions a hall of mirrors, and knowing what we know about King Ludwig II, this can't be a coincidence, right? You're speaking my language. Another palace, another hall of mirrors. It seems like King Ludwig II was really into creating his own illusions. So how does Linderhof's hall of mirrors compare to the one at Versailles?
Well, it's definitely more intimate, smaller in scale than its inspiration at Versailles. But what's fascinating is how it reflects Ludwig's personality in a different way. Imagine this. Walls covered in mirrors, strategically placed candles creating flickering reflections, the whole room designed to play with light and perception.
So instead of a grand spectacle like at Versailles, this was more of a personal illusion booth.
Exactly. It's like he built himself a space to get lost in his own thoughts and reflections, surrounded by beauty and artifice. It's a side of Ludwig we don't see in his grander palaces, a more introspective, even vulnerable side.
It's amazing how each location reveals something new about him. We started with this image of a fairy tale king, but as we've peeled back the layers, we've seen a more complex picture emerge. Ambition, loneliness, a deep yearning for escape. It makes you wonder what else is hiding beneath the surface of these iconic places.
That's the thrill of a deep dive, isn't it? You start with the familiar and end up someplace entirely unexpected.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Olivia wraps up her article with a quote from Orlando Bloom, who describes Bavaria as a magical experience. And honestly, after this journey, I can see why. But here's a thought to leave you with. Is it Bavaria that's inherently magical? Or is it the stories we discover, the history we uncover, the human element that makes these places feel so extraordinary?
What a wonderful question to ponder. It reminds us that travel is about more than just checking off a list of sites. It's about engaging with the stories those places tell, the emotions they evoke, the connections we make along the way.
Well said. A huge thanks to you for joining me on this Bavarian adventure. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep diving deep.